Kipp, what's up, man? Good to see you. I know I don't look as good today because my video has been off, but maybe that
Yeah, yeah.
blocks out some of the blemishes. Look, I don't know if
Me
you can see
too.
my face.
Me too.
I'm feeling a little banged up today. My nose and my face is all raw because I got back to training after 2 weeks of hiatus because we had a little bit of COVID going around. So I wasn't able to train for the last couple of weeks, but I went
So
back
your
yesterday.
skin got all sensitive, and now
All
it's
weak and pathetic and paper thin, and so I got to rebuild the calluses on my face as I get back into it.
so true though. That
It
happens,
is true.
man. It's
The
weird.
thing that I'm glad about though actually is that so far, I mean, I only went last night and this morning just to get back into it. So far I don't have any rawness on the top of my feet, which is horrible.
That's the best.
You wouldn't think, but it is horrible when you start rubbing the blisters on your feet, and I think I'm past that stage though.
Well, like a couple weeks ago when I started training it back again, same thing. And I usually carry Band-Aids in my bag. So that way, when after I shower, I can put Band-Aids on my feet, because what happens is I'll take a shower, and if I don't have Band-Aids, I put my shoes on, I put my socks on, and then I go to work.
Yeah.
And then I get home
You're
and I
stuck to your socks.
and I rip my socks off, and it rips off all the scabs. It's so gross. I'm like, I
don't do
So,
Band-Aids.
and
What I try to do is I just try to stick my feet in people's face as often as I can when I'm rolling and I have blisters. And that seems to get them off me pretty quick.
yeah. Oh man. Anyhow, it's so funny, the things that the nuances of jiu-jitsu that you don't realize, they exist until you start training.
Well, the other thing I was thinking about it today too, because this morning I kind of lost my cool a little bit, like not bad, but just a little bit. Because my buddy Brody Cousineau that I train with, he was like just pounding on me, and
So you get a little frustrated.
I legit could not do anything. I'm like, what in the hell is going on? And finally, I don't know if I was able to sweep him or something. He was on top of me in side control and something where I got in his side, and I just like Hulk mode. And then because I was pissed, and afterwards I was like, dude, I'm sorry. He's like, no, I just saw the beast. Like, I need to see the beast. And I'm like, I know, but I started thinking about it when I was on the drive home, and I was like, man, jiu-jitsu grounds me. Like that, the reason I went into like beast mode where I was just like, is because I haven't been doing it for 2 weeks. And so I had all this like aggression and this frustration and this whatever it is that we as men have built up inside of me. And I had no outlet for 2 weeks, and I finally have an outlet, and I let it all come out at once, as opposed to just being calm and collected. And so, yeah, I lost my cool a little bit this morning. So it's all good.
That's good. Yeah, I had a guy last week. It was last Friday. We get done training. He comes back after and goes, hey, did I do anything wrong? Like, did I roll like an ass or anything? And I was like, no, but was I rolling like, he's like, oh, no, I don't know. I was just, I was kind of nervous because I felt like you're kind of hurting me. I was like, sorry, man. Like, I wasn't angry. That was just my default meanness, I guess. I don't know. So, but it was kind of funny. Like, there's a little bit of like, is there tension between us?
Actually, I think that's a pretty good sign of a good training partner. Somebody, because look, I mean, let's not pretend that we don't get pissed off or frustrated or want to just exert our dominance when we're there. Of course, like why? If you don't have that sort of edge, you're not going to be good at all. Ever.
That's why we're doing jiu-jitsu, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then a training partner who's at least aware of it and says, "Hey, man, like I lost my cool, or I shouldn't have done." I remember when you and I were at immersion camp, and I put like my forearm into your jaw or something.
There's no submission there. You're just
dude,
like,
that's being a dick. But then you say it and you get it off your chest or whatever. You say it to the guy. He's like, yeah, no worries. And I'm sorry. And, you hug it out and it's all good. Right. So,
yeah.
But that is a sign of a good training partner. And I did a Friday field notes, I think. Or no, I did it in, where was it? It was either Friday field. Oh, yeah, it was a Friday field notes. Who's your battle brother?
Yeah.
And I talked about qualities to look for. I actually think that's one. You want somebody who's willing to go hard, but also has a level of humility that says, you know what? I screwed up. Like, I'm sorry. my bad. Let's get back to
Yeah.
it. Whether it's jujitsu or just life in general. And I think that's a pretty good thing to look for, because you don't want somebody who's passive, who doesn't have that edge. You don't want somebody like that. And you don't want somebody who's not humble enough to admit, hey, man, I screwed up. Like, sorry about that. Let's fix it. Right. So
yeah, well,
you got to walk that line.
And you can't deal with that, right? You can't deal with a guy that loses his cool and they can't own it. Because, like, how do you resolve that, or how do you progress or whatever in that scenario? Now he's walking with a chip on his shoulder. It's like, now you're dealing with ego. It's like, oh man, that's miserable.
Yeah.
That's miserable.
My son went with me this morning, and it was funny because we got done training, and he was just laughing. I'm like, what are you laughing at? He's like, I love watching you and Brody roll. And I'm like, why? He's like, because it's funny, like watching you two go at it. And so when we got there, since we hadn't been training long, I was like, hey, Brody, you just want to go like 50, 60% today? Or for the first roll, like ease into it. He's like, yeah, sure. And he like tried to pass my guard. I went to 70. I tried to sweep him. He went to 80. I tried to, mount him. He goes to 90. And it's like in 30 seconds, we're from 50 to 110%,
Totally.
And Brecken was just laughing. He just thought it was so funny.
Yeah, you're like, oh, nice light roll, guys. Yeah.
I was like, you were going 100? I was going 50. That was my 50. Sorry, I don't know. I guess I'm just strong or something.
Last story we promise on jiu-jitsu, but last week I was training with Marcus, Marcus, and I'm kind of like flopping to my side, like cash jiu-jitsu, like, I don't know, kind of lazy. And I can't remember the position, but positions changed, and all of a sudden Marcus went from casual to I'm going to hurt you.
Which is very likely that he will. He's
totally.
a badass.
And my bean went right to survival. Like instantly I was just like, I was like crazy, And then afterwards I was like, thank you. And he's like, yeah, you're going too light or whatever. And I was like, no, I needed the wake up, the reality roll, and I was like, okay, yeah, that was good. But what was great is he was able to do that. He wasn't mad.
It was intentional.
It wasn't angry. Yeah. It was just going after that edge, right? Like going, not being light on me. Right. And it's like stepping up our game. So
Marcus is awesome. The only time I rolled with him is that time I came out. We had a couple of order man guys come out, and we trained a little bit in the morning. And I think I had him in a Kimura. And, it's a pretty neutral position, right? Unless you have like a dominant position, I guess, maybe, but it's pretty neutral. And I had him, and within half a second, he had me. He just
in the Kimura.
In the Kimura, yeah.
Like, punches through and then gets you. Yeah. He's a strong guy too. Yeah, so like that Kimura, you're like, and he's like,
nope. Yeah. All right. Enough jiu-jitsu. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Questions.
Dude, so our world, it's falling apart. It's crazy.
We'll probably get into that. We'll weave some of that conversation into these questions.
So you guys followed Ryan at Ryan Mickler on Instagram. And when you posted, hey, we're doing some AMA questions on your Instagram, huge amount of guys replied.
Like 200 questions or something.
It was crazy. Yeah. So we still have some questions as a leftover from that original request. So we're in Instagram at this moment. We'll see if we can get out of Instagram over to Facebook or from into the Iron Council. All right. Cool. Cornerstone of America. Where do you see Order of Man making the biggest impact over the next 5 years? And I think we can call out, you had an ep that you kind of almost like a call to action, of a reach out to guys like, hey, we need to band together. Maybe we make reference to that episode, but I don't know. I'm not sure what you'd want to add to it, but
yeah. I mean, obviously we're in turbulent times. We're in disturbing times. I guess depending on what side of the fence that you sit on, I see some real threats to our way of life. I don't want to get into any sort of like fear mongering or anything like that, but let's be realistic. There's some real threats to the way that we have lived our lives, from encroachments on the First Amendment, also on the Second Amendment. So, these are things that we need to be vigilant about and we need to be prepared for. And so sometimes I've had people say, oh, you're sounding like a cult. No, you know what? I'm sounding like somebody who wants men to prepare themselves. And I'm not saying the zombie apocalypse. I'm not saying the end of the world or World War III, but I am saying that there are government officials who I think would love nothing more than to strip away our First and Second Amendment rights and everything that go along with it. I believe that's the case. And so we as men need to band together. We need to be vigilant about these things. We need to be prepared. We need to be influential and strong and credible and independently wealthy, so there isn't that debt and all of that looming over our heads. These are all things that we've been talking about, frankly, for 6 years now. Yeah. In fact, I saw a memory come up just this morning. 3 years ago today, I finished Sovereignty. I finished writing Sovereignty. So that was pretty cool to see that come up. And it's also more relevant 3 years to the date later than it ever was. And we continue to see more and more men picking that up and living by this idea of individual sovereignty, which I think is good. So to answer the question, where do I see Order of Man going? I think we're going to do a lot of the same. I think we're going to do it on a bigger scale, a grander scale. We're going to continue to work to get incredible guests on the podcast who are going to share things that we may not all agree on, but at least enlighten us and change our perspective and give us additional things to think about. We're going to continue to grow the Iron Council and offer courses and programs and email courses and things like this that we've already been doing that will hopefully equip men with the tools they need to take action. When I started Order of Man in March of 2015, so almost 6 years now, my entire goal was to bridge the gap between what we know and what we do. And so I saw a lot of organizations out there. I saw a lot of podcasts out there and magazines who were preaching information, which was good, but I felt like it was only half the battle. Good, you know what you're supposed to do. Now, are you doing it? And the answer was no. It was overwhelmingly no. And so there was this huge integrity gap between what we know and what we're actually doing. And when we started 6 years ago, my goal was to bridge that gap between, again, what we know and what we actually do. So we're coming up with a battle planning app, which is going to be available. I personally like to write my stuff down. You guys have seen this. For those of you who want to do it on the phone, you'll have that option, battle planning app. We've got a leadership development course being developed right now inside of the Iron Council that will be available. And then we're also going to have an achievement and advancement initiative that will probably start in the early part of Q2 of this year, which will hold men accountable and give them very clear paths to run on to improve their capabilities as men. But outside of that, and you and I were talking about this before we hit record, is I really think we need to get men together locally. I know I've been talking about it for years, and at this point you might think, okay, Ryan's just paying lip service to this thing. And frankly, I have up to this point because I haven't really been all that interested in doing it because I realize the time commitment that comes with it and the amount of capital and resources that I would need to pour into something like that. But I think the time is here, so we're going to be getting a little bit more strategical in how we're going to implement these regional and local meetups. And they're going to be very structured. They're going to be very organized. We're going to have guest speakers come in. We're going to make sure that it's not focused so heavily on just lecturing at you, because you can go to church and get that. You can go to your business conference and get that. And you'll hear, 10 wonderful speakers throughout the weekend, and they'll tell you everything they need to do. And then you go and you're like, okay, I'm hopped up, but I don't even actually know how to implement this stuff. Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the things that makes our events so unique is, we have some guest speakers come in. We have some experts talk about some things. And then it's like, now let's go Let's go train jiu-jitsu. Let's go shoot archery. Let's have PT in the morning. So it's a very active program. It's not just you being gabbed at for, 2 or 3 days. And we're going to implement these things with regional and local chapters. And I expect that to come online this year. There will be a format. There will be a structure. There will be themes so that you and me and the hopefully tens, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of men who decide to start getting involved in these things, we're all working collectively, whether you're in Australia or the UK or our many Canadian brothers or here in the United States. We're all going to be working on the same thing so that the directives and the information, the ideas are very clear, and we're very much in unison with what we're learning, discussing, and acting on. So these are some things. I'm talking about it loosely and broadly right now. I get it. But these are some things that have been on my radar, and I think it's time to start pulling the trigger.
Exciting. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's great.
It'll be
It's
great.
overwhelming. Frankly, for me, I'm like, oh, even when I talk about it, I'm overwhelmed because I've got enough things. And, also I want to be a dad. I want to be a good husband, so I hear me talk about even just like hear me saying it. And I'm not making any sort of irrational or misguided expectations about the level of investment and resources this is going to take, which is why I haven't done it up to this point, but it's becoming more serious.
Yeah, that's needed. All right, Jay Crucell, what distractions did you face in 2020 and have you carried over so far into 2021?
I don't get distracted. I really don't. I mean, yeah, maybe I want to watch a TV show or something at night, or, maybe initially with COVID, I was like, oh man, how's this going to change everything? And it actually caused us to postpone 2 different events that we ended up having one later on. So there was little things like that, but I'm not easily deterred or distracted. And my wife could attest to that. It takes me a while sometimes to lock onto things, but when I lock onto something,
you're usually all in. Yeah,
that's it. So it does take me a minute to lock on to something, but man, once I've made that decision, I actually get tunnel vision, and maybe that's a bit of a problem. I think everybody's a little different personalities. I'm an obsessive personality, so if I find something to latch onto, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed right now with jujitsu. We talk about it every week. Yeah. I'm obsessed with my canoe that I'm building. I'm obsessed with what we're going to be doing here with Order of Man. I'm obsessed. That's my personality. And it could actually, in a lot of instances, be a detriment. I realize that. And it also allows me to achieve a lot. And other men have to deal with being maybe a little bit distracted or even flippant about things or easily entertained. And, that's a challenge for a lot of guys. But that's never been something I've ever dealt with, even from the time I was little. Like I could lock in, dial it in. I'm all in at the expense of everything else, which is a real challenge for me at times.
Yeah.
And the people that I love and want to serve, my wife and my kids, they feel the pain of that because I do get latched onto something and they feel that. They feel neglected at times and I have to have those conversations and I have to find a way to balance it. But distraction is not one I deal with. So for me to tell you, I get distracted to all these things would be disingenuous.
If I had to guess, there's probably a lot of guys listening that would say the political climate and the politics around COVID and the news and the noise. And I don't even know if I should call it noise, might be considered a distraction, right? Like, and I fall into that a little bit. Like sometimes I have a strong opinion about something and I'll see someone post something on Facebook and then I'll be like, yeah, man, you're wrong. And you know what I mean? I'll get wrapped up into it. But in the same breath, like, and I'm changing this guy's question a little bit. In the same breath, like, I also feel like there's a level of like, hey, you know what I mean? Like we should say something too. Right. And so I find that's a distraction, at least for me. Any advice or thoughts, you know what I mean? For guys that kind of get wrapped up into the politics of things.
Well, you said I should say something in some instances. I mean, that's not really the full thought. The full thought should be, I should, if I care about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's relevant to me, for example, if somebody says something that I don't agree with regards to how men show up or how they should show up or, the kind of men they are, and somebody says something like that, I'm probably going to engage with that because that's a relevant discussion for me. Yeah. Sometimes it's just exposure. I deal with this stuff every day where people are, coming at me from different angles with different things. I'm like, what the hell are you even talking about? And I don't care what they're talking about. And I've learned over time not to engage because I know what I'm going after. And getting drawn into a debate with a troll, and there's different spectrums of trolls, but getting drawn into a debate with a troll isn't actually going to help me move the needle towards my objective. Yeah. So I guess the point would be, why? Yeah. If a guy gets into a debate or an argument with you, I actually have a rule because I'm all about boundaries. I break the rule occasionally and it never goes well when I break the rule. But the rule is, look, if somebody wants to have a civil discourse on social media about something that's relevant to me, I will do that. But the minute I sense any sort of hostility or intellectual dishonesty or just game playing, I have one simple rule. It's a one response maximum. So if somebody comes back and says something and I feel like I need to say something or get it off my chest, I will respond once. And in my mind, I'm like, regardless of what this person says back or what they come back with, I've already reached my limit on responses. I have a one response maximum when I start to get some of that disingenuousness or that troll-like behavior. And that little boundary, believe it or not, very simple, has saved me hundreds, if not thousands of hours over the past 6 years of getting drawn into bullshit that has no relevancy in my life or my mission.
Yeah, because it can be never ending. And then
of course,
in the end, you're like, okay, so I'm trying to convince this one guy that's not even intelligent enough to like understand or work through his thought process to a conclusion. So how do I even engage? It might not even
be a guy. You might actually be arguing with a bot. Like you legitimately could be arguing with a bot.
Yeah.
Code. Yeah. How stupid. You know, so we got to be very careful and protect our time. I actually had one guy, this was months ago. He came back and said, I don't really care what you say. Or, I'm just getting paid to do this.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if he was lying or telling the truth, but to me, that was enough of a like, whoop, what? Okay. So he's not even, again, disingenuous. He's not there for the discussion. He's there, maybe, I don't know if this is true or not, but what he said is he's there because he's getting paid. That's enough for me to disengage. There's nothing that I could say or do that would be like a gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a waste of time. Now, we're talking about it on social media, but there might be real life conversations. You know, somebody at work, a colleague might come to you and say, hey, can I talk with you about that? And you know you're not interested in that. Shut it down.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Like I can appreciate, you know, you want to talk about the game or whatever. I've got these, 100 tasks I need to do today. So, and plus I don't care about the game. Or if you care about the game, maybe it's like, hey, let's talk about that tonight over beers, but right now I got to work. Like have these boundaries in place, know yourself enough to know what you get distracted with, know what your prize is, what you're actually going after, and to hell with everything else.
I like it. All right, Mr. J. Wilson, 88. At what point do you stop pushing for more and begin to enjoy life and passions more? When is enough enough when it comes to pursuing more money, bigger career moves, etc.?
Read the first part of that question again.
Yeah. At what point do you stop pushing for more and begin to enjoy your life and passions more?
Pause right there. Why are those at odds with each other?
Yeah.
I assume you're talking about financial success, career endeavors, career pursuits. Why is that at odds with something that you enjoy and you're passionate about? That's the real question. Yeah. Why do I view these two things as opposites that are conflicting over and fighting over each other? I don't feel that way. Like when we grow the podcast or I grow my bank account or we enlist new members in the Iron Council or sell new merchandise or whatever it is, I'm making more money. This is a business. I don't make any qualms about that. I'm gaining and garnering more attention and more credibility and influence. Oh, and also I really actually love what I do. I love doing this. I love having these conversations, Kipp, with you. I like talking with these guys that I've never met that are interesting and fascinating to me. I like giving you the tools and resources that you need to lead yourselves and the people you care about well. I like that. And I like making a lot of money doing it. And they're not at odds with each other. They're not. And I think that's part of the reason that people like what it is we're doing. Is like, I'm never going to shy away from saying, look, I'm adding value. I'll exchange. I'll trade with you. You give me money and I'll give you whatever it is that you're after. And you're not after it, you don't have to give me money. Voluntary. That's fine. I think people like that because again, it's genuine, right? There's no sort of
a secret,
weird elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. Every once in a while, people will calculate how much money I make based on the number of Iron Council members, and I don't care if you, calculate it. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is I'm providing enough value that you feel like it's worth purchasing. That's what matters to me. So I think you really ought to question why you feel like your financial success, your career pursuits are at odds with your enjoyment of life. I don't think they should be. I think they should be very much in alignment and very paralleled, and you're going to live a much more enriched, fulfilled life when you do that. Now, that said, I've hired people over the past even 12 months where we've started to bring the right people in to handle different aspects of my business that I don't enjoy or that I need to leverage so I can free up my time to pursue other endeavors within the organization. Or, maybe I just want to take the afternoon off. And here's a prime example, Kipp. You and I were talking before this podcast. I'm going to be traveling for the next week. So I asked if you would host one of our Iron Council team calls. I want to be there, but I also want to travel a little bit. So I'm going to go travel. You're going to hold the meeting down, and it's going to be great. And they're not at odds with each other. So I'm going to continue to pursue. I'm not stopping ever. It's a hard question for me to answer.
Yeah. And you're creating an opportunity for me that I'm excited about, right? Like we're both benefiting from that example. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Ryan, because sometimes, and I use this example. I know two guys that work, I need to be careful, that work for the same company. And if you ask the one guy, he's like, best job in the world. Mm-hmm. Like literally loves his job. The other guy's like, worst job in the world and literally thinks it's like the worst thing in the world. They do the same thing. Right. And so how much, and I can't help but look at this and say, okay, we can reply to Jay Wilson 88 here and say, hey, dude, change your job, do something that aligns with your passions. But part of me also says, mindset, like, why can't you enjoy whatever it is that you are doing as well? Like, where do you draw the line there of, aligning your passions to your job versus having the correct mindset? And what recommendation would you give around that?
Well, so remember when I told you about the reminder that I saw on the book that it's been 3 years since I finished it? So I just made a quick post. I shared the memory and I made a quick post on Facebook. And I said in the post itself, I said, I actually really hated and disliked the writing process. But you know what? I'm proud as hell that I wrote the book. I know people needed to receive it in the written word. So although I didn't enjoy the writing process, it was part of the mission. Yeah. It wasn't my favorite part, but the fact that it's getting out there to people is valuable to me. So, look, I know we've said it in the past and I've kind of been rethinking is like, well, it's really about how you approach it and you could really love this job. I don't know if you could love everything that you ever did just because you had the right mindset. I think that's a little bit utopian. Yeah. A little bit fairy tale-ish. Like if you just believe it, it will be good for you. Like, but you know what? I do believe that you could just frame it and say, you know what? This sucks, but it's going to help me on the path to something better. For example, I don't like deadlifts. I don't enjoy them at all, but I do deadlifts because I want to be strong and I want to be capable and I want to have strong legs and I want to apply it to jiu-jitsu and I want to see my kids, or I want my kids to see me doing things that are hard and challenging. There's a lot of reasons that I'll do it in spite of not enjoying it all that much. So, like, what's more important to you? You liking everything that you do, or you achieving ultimate success, the success that you're after? And sometimes that means we need to do some things we don't like. Yeah. So where the job ends up becoming the means for you to enjoy life. And that's it. So like, again, I'm trying to be more careful of just being utopian. Like, believe it into existence and enjoy it, and it will. I can't stand that. I hear people like that every day on Instagram and YouTube. I'm like, shut up. Like, where's the people who are being realistic? Look, I know what it's like to do some shitty job. I know what it's like to do something you don't like and enjoy. I know what it's like to have a boss who's an asshole. I know all that stuff. I'm not going to tell you if you were just better, that everything would be awesome. No, it just means that you got to bear down and get through it to get onto something else. That to me is realistic. Well,
and to your point that you're making earlier, it's like, that's realistic. And it's also realistic that running that marathon sucked ass, but guess what? It felt good when I was done. It felt really good.
Right.
And it felt really good doing irrigation work in the middle of the morning when I was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did it feel good in the moment? Right. But when I was done, it felt great.
Yeah.
Right. All right. I am Danny Boy. Hey, Danny Boy. How can I deal with the bad habits and negative traits cultivated from growing up in my family environment and overcome those and be a better example in my future household when I marry and have a family? Deal with the bad habits and negative traits.
Yeah. You already answered the question. You used a word in there. That word was environment. How do I deal with the negative habits and the traits and characteristics that I learned in the environment while I was growing up? Change your environment. That's it. You learned it in that environment, so get a new environment and you're going to learn new skills. So find people who are successful, read good books, listen to good podcasts, go to conferences, go to courses, identify the men and women who are thriving and succeeding in your area, band with them, offer value to them, ask them to mentor you, pay them for coaching, change your environment in every way. For example, how could you, let's say you're 50 pounds overweight. How could you go to the gym? Just go because you want to be present in there. How could you go to the gym and not have some of that enthusiasm and discipline and grit rub off on you? It's impossible. It's impossible not to be impacted by your environment. So start to identify better environments and thrust yourself in, as uncomfortable as they are. And they are uncomfortable. You know, I've been to meetings or networking events, or even just things that events that I think I should be at for one reason or the other. And I don't know anybody. I go by myself and I feel so dumb. I walk in the room and everybody's chumming up to each other.
No one to talk to. Yeah,
and they're telling inside jokes and stories. And I'm like, yeah, that was cool, you know. But I go because that's where the winners are. And I want to be around the winners. And then the next time I go, I'm in the circle. You know, now I'm telling, hey, remember when so-and-so did this last year? Or remember we went to that restaurant? I get to be in the inner circle this year. But it takes you going the first year where you don't know anybody and you feel like a fool.
Yeah, starting forced conversation. Hi, my name's Ryan.
Right. But you do it. You just do it.
Yeah.
You know? Like if I came up to you, if I saw you at a function and I'm like, oh, that guy looks successful, I would actually walk up to you and I'd be like, hey, I saw your shirt. I'm not familiar with that. Protect, provide, preside. What is that?
Yeah.
I mean, what a great icebreaker.
Totally.
Easy.
And then I got to talk about myself. Oh, there's this weird guy from Parowan, Utah.
You said it wrong. It's not Parowan. It's Parowan.
Oh, Parowan. Sorry.
Dang, come on. South Severe. I thought you would, or no, not South Severe. Where are you from? What's
South Severe?
Monroe.
Elsinore, actually.
Elsinore. Okay. All
yeah.
right. It's all South Severe. Shipped you guys in so you'd have enough guys to play on the football team.
Yeah. Grab all the nearby towns.
We probably could have played, 9-man football? When I got to Parowan, I remember, every school has their trophy cases or whatever lining the halls.
Yeah.
And I saw things for, I think it was 9, maybe even 7. It was like 7 or 9 man. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I'm like,
really?
What is
like
that?
A 7-man football?
Yes.
Or whatever?
They had a league.
Even know that was a thing.
Because it was Parowan and Milford and Beaver, probably South Severe was probably there at some point.
Yeah.
So these small, rural southern Utah towns. Anyways, I think we answered the question, change your environment.
Yeah. Okay. Done. How to create a better network? Which steps and approaches would be better? Is it similar to the previous question, right? Like change your environment is how you build a good network and surrounding yourself with those key individuals, maybe strategies around it. I'm
trying to give people like the benefit of the doubt. And so with all due respect, I think you probably already know how to do it. It's just not comfortable to reach out to somebody is not comfortable. To go to a business
for an
function
easier way
or a networking group is not comfortable. To see that there's a conference coming up that you really think you probably ought to be at for one reason or the other, but you don't know anybody else there. Or to get, here's a silly one. You get invited on a hunt. Okay. And most people hear that and they think, like I would go do that. But would you? Like if you didn't know anybody and somebody invited you, would you be willing to do that? Something you actually really enjoy. Would you get over yourself long enough to go do it? I've done that. And I've been on hunts, probably half a dozen hunts where I didn't know a single person. And they invited me for whatever reason. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And it's been so rewarding and enriching, not just for the hunt itself, but because of the connections that I make. So I think when it comes to networking, you probably just ought to say yes to a bunch more things with other people than you would normally say yes to. And I would say if you have a hard time connecting and networking with people, then your default answer when it comes to questions about being around other people, hey, do you want to come out for drinks? Hey, do you want to go to the game? Hey, we've got this extra person for a golf foursome, or we're going to go to this conference, or hey, at lunch, people around the water cooler like, hey, we're going to go over to, Johnny's for lunch today. Like your default answer, if this is a rough thing for you, probably just ought to be yes, and just deal with the pain for a little while and you'll get better at it.
Yeah. Got it.
I'm not a naturally extroverted person. I'm really not. I could be completely content being in my house, being around the property, going down into my basement, working on projects. I could do that forever. And people say, well, but you're doing this podcast. Yes, because I'm not defined by being an introvert. I just get a lot of value from being alone and working on my own things, but I also realize that I have goals and ambitions that are going to take me putting myself into these kind of environments, as risky as it can be, around other people. And so it's not that I'm incapable of doing it, and you're not incapable of doing it. It's just that you have to get over yourself long enough to go do it and stop saying, well, I'm an introvert. Are you? Or are you just kind of introverted and awkward around people like everybody else on the planet?
Yeah. Totally. All right. There's the design to man. What got you interested in building a canoe?
I don't know.
An ad on Facebook. You're like, that would be cool.
Probably.
But
No,
didn't
I'll tell you,
you
I
made
went-
a reference of like an ancestor or something that
I didn't find that out until after, though, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll explain that story here in a second. But my wife and I and our kids spent a lot of time at the lake this year, which is interesting because, we're from southern Utah. It's a desert. There's no water in the desert. So we've never been lake people. You know how there's lake people? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like we've never been a lake family, ever. There's also like mountain families and snow families. Like we're a mountain family. So we'd go up to the cabin and we'd spend time on land. So this year though, being here in Maine with water around every bend, we spent a ton of time at the lake, and I went and bought a month or two into the season, I went and bought one of those lifestyle canoes, those like plastic canoe. They're really nice. So we went and bought one, and we loved it, man. What did I say? Lifestyle? Yes, Lifetime.
Yeah, Lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah.
The brand.
And we loved it. We loved it. Like we had so much fun just paddling. And I remember going out to the lake, and there was these rocks that were kind of sticking out of the water. And I paddled over there, I think with my daughter, my youngest son, and there was a snapping turtle sitting on the rock. So we tried to see how close we'd get to, we just enjoyed it. We went around one bend, and there was a bald eagle in the tree. We just really, really enjoyed it. And then as I was canoeing back one time, or paddling back one time, I thought, man, wouldn't this be awesome in a canoe? And I was like, okay, I could just go buy one, but that's lame. Like, go build one. So I started looking for plans, and I've had this idea for 6 months, maybe even longer than that, but it just kind of came to fruition. And I'm like, all right, just do it. Just do. And I've been telling my wife forever, I'm going to do this. And she's like, don't. Usually she's very encouraging of all my pursuits. She was actually very discouraging on this one, but she was doing it from a good place.
She knows what it's going to mean. Yeah, you're going to be stuck out in the shed for the next 6 months building a canoe. Yeah.
Well, no, she thought I had so many other projects and things that I would start, but I would never finish. Like, she knows me pretty well. Yeah. And she's like, don't, just do this first, do that first. And there's some little odds in it. I made her a deal because I believe in honoring, what her desires as well, So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do these few projects and things around the house. And when I get that done, then I'm going to do the canoe. She's like, okay. So I cranked those out and got the canoe, and it's been a good process, man. In fact, I got the tools that I needed just last night. So I'm going to be working on it which is phase 3, steaming and shaping the stems, which is the front and back of the boat.
Yeah.
I'll be doing that this afternoon and tonight, which is cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Steaming. So you literally steam them so they bend?
Yeah, you steam them. You use an electric teapot and you steam them you get like a PVC pipe and you put the stems in the PVC pipe and put a rag underneath and a rag at top so the steam can't escape. And then you keep it in there for about 20 minutes and it makes them pliable. And then you take it out and you literally have about 45 seconds to get it on the mold. And then you clamp it at different parts of the mold so it clamps its bend. And then it dries for about 24 hours. And then you take it off of the clamps and you put a string around the end so it keeps its shape, and you let it dry for another 24 hours because all the air circulates and dries it. And then you glue them together. Then you secure it to the craft. Then you shave it and shape it the way you want it to match the front end of the boat.
Interesting.
Or back end.
Why not glue it and hammer it? Why it's pliable? Why take it off and that?
Because I don't exactly know, but the way that the fibers work, it needs to be completely dried for the glue. Because when you're doing the stem, there's actually 3 strips of wood. So to apply the glue and to have it hold the way that it needs to hold, it needs to be completely dry. The fibers actually need to dry in that shape. So you need to let them dry out completely before you glue it. Then you stick them back together, and that glue holds better when they're dry. I'm not the best guy to answer, but based on my research, that's what it said.
Yeah, dude. When you said you were getting a canoe, I was like, that's so awesome. I don't even know what movie I've seen. It was like some National Geographic movie, but I saw something once where someone like cut down a tree and they carved out a canoe. And I was like, that is so awesome. I was like, that would be the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. There's some amazing, some amazing artists and craftsmen, and people have introduced me to people. And there's this guy, in fact, I'll give him a shout out real quick because he has some really cool stuff on Instagram. So if you're interested, and like any craft and hobby that I've found in my life, the community is always so open and receptive. Like, have you noticed that? Mm-hmm. Whether it's shooting or hunting or jujitsu or this or that, like the community is always so excited to have somebody else who's interested in it. So this guy's name is Trent Pressler. And he's on his Instagram bio, it says wooden boat builder, winery CEO. The boats that he makes are unbelievable. So it's Pressler, Pressler Woodshop, Pressler Woodshop. It's awesome. So a bunch of people introduced me to him, and I sent him a message. He's coming out with a new book. He sent me a link to it. I picked it up, but I sent a message to him and I said, hey Trent, I just started doing this thing. I've been following you. A bunch of people introduced me. Your work's beautiful, that kind of thing. And he was so receptive. He's like, yeah, I saw that you're building. You're making great progress. If you have questions, shoot me a message. I'll give you some insight. Like I said, way receptive and helpful.
That's cool. Yeah. That's really cool.
All right. But that goes back to the networking thing. Let me tie that back into that.
Yeah.
You're scared that people aren't going to accept you. Right? Because what if I told you that to whatever networking event you went to, you're going to receive 100% reception. People are going to roll out the red carpet for you. They're going to embrace you. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. They're going to love you. And I guaranteed that would happen 100% of the time. How many events would you go to? All of them.
Yeah.
So why don't you? Because you don't think that will happen. You think you're going to be ostracized. You're going to feel uncomfortable. People are looking at you weird. They're not going to include you in the thing. That's what you think. That's not actually reality. Everything that I've ever been to that is centered or focused on some sort of centralized mission or purpose or craft or hobby or activity, people are receptive. They want you there, and they will embrace you. They will embrace you. They want you to be there. So be there.
Yeah, that's funny. All right,
and
Nolan.
Also, one more thing. Sorry, I got to say this also.
Nolan Dove. Just joking.
Nolan, I'm going to get to your question, I promise. But I got to say one other thing. So there's this weird thing, okay, and it happens a lot in our church culture, Kipp, where I'll move. So our church, it's international, right? I can go anywhere and have a chapel and a ward anywhere I go, okay? And I hear people say, oh, well, I moved to New Mexico and we came from Maine and we just loved everybody at church. And then we moved to New Mexico and nobody even welcomed us and nobody even like reached out and fellowshipped. I'm like, it's not their okay, look, sure, they should do that.
Would it be nice? Yeah.
Yes, they should do that. And anybody who, is welcome, like people should do that. You should include people. But it's also not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to insert yourself into the culture. Yeah. I've had people ask me, "Oh, how do you know so many people in Maine?" And because I insert myself into the culture. We're involved in sports. We're involved with other things. I'm friendly to people. I go out and I reach out to my neighbors. We give them gifts. They give us gifts. We look after each other. I ask questions. I ask for introductions. I make introductions. I insert myself into the dynamic of the culture, and people have embraced me. I had people when I moved here who said, "Oh, you're from away, or you're a flatlander. People really won't welcome you here." I found that to be the furthest thing from the truth.
Interesting.
Because I didn't give them an option.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to welcome me because I'm going to be part of this. You don't have an option as to whether or not I'm around. I'm going to be here, so we might as well be friends. But there's too many of us are so passive and like, oh, what if they this? What if they... Yeah, well, what if? But the overwhelming majority of people will embrace you, will like you, will challenge you, will help you. You just got to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you never know like why they're not reaching out, right? Like you walk into the neighborhood and you're like, oh, they think they're better than we are. Like who knows their story? You know what I mean?
Really? Like why would you go there? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. All right. We're ready. Okay. Nolan.
Oh, wait, one more thing. All right, Nolan. What do you got, man?
I love how we think we're funny and everyone else
we're
is
not
like,
funny.
These guys are idiots. All right.
We're dad joke funny. That's like the extent of it. All the daughters and the boys and the sons are rolling their eyes because their dads are making the same jokes we're making right now.
Although I have a dad joke that's like the best of all dad jokes. At one time, when appropriate, we should save it. We should do an episode.
Nolan's like, guys, bro, just get to my question, please.
It's a good question. What kind of bow do you shoot?
I shoot. Oh, I don't have it here. It's downstairs. I shoot the Hoyt RX-1.
There you go. All right. Goody 228.
I guess I could give you, I don't know. Do you want more specs? I think it's I think I should know this, but I think my draw is a 28.5 or 29-inch draw. It's dialed into 70 pounds. And usually I will shoot the Knock to It by John Dudley, but I just got his new wrist strap release, which is kind of an interesting take on the wrist strap release. It's actually a tension release, but it's a wrist strap. It's called the back strap, so I just bought that, so I'm interested to try that out. It does away with target panic. I use the Spot Hog single pin. It's actually a double pin, but set up like a single pin sight, and I shoot FMJs. There you go. Awesome. And I changed my broadheads. Usually rage broadheads, expandables, but I've thought about going to fixed broadheads as well. I don't know. That's what I shoot now. Seems to work pretty well.
So is in bow culture, is there like, oh, you 70 pounds,
yes.
My draw's a 34, 90 pound.
Yes. Not so much the draw length. So 34, 34 is like a super long draw. You'd have to be like an orangutan or something to have that kind of draw length. But so the draw length, not so much, but the poundage, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm drawing 100.
Exactly.
Like, oh.
I don't really see the need to. I just need to draw it back where it's easy and I can control. Not easy, but where I can control it without like moving a lot because you don't want to scare the deer away. And then it just needs to get the job done. That's
and that determines how far away you can shoot.
Not so much. I mean, yes, technically, I guess distance, but velocity mostly.
Oh, okay.
Speed of the arrow.
And is 70 average?
Slightly better than average, I would say.
Nice.
I don't know.
All
I
right,
don't get
Goody
too,
two
I think most of the guys I hunt with, they shoot right around the same weight.
around the same. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? There's other guys. There's the Backwoods Bait and Tackle. That's the archery shop that I go to. Older gentleman. He's like, yeah, I shoot like a 55, 60 pound draw weight, which is actually not a lot necessarily. He's like, but it gets the job done. I'm like, cool, rock on.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
It works. Yeah. All right. Goody 228. Why should people have children?
I don't think you should have children. That's a good question. I wish I would have prepared for that one because that's a really good question. I'll tell you what, for me, here's my take.
Maybe the benefits.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're thinking you should, I don't know if you should. But if you have a desire, then certainly you should consider it. But for me, the benefits are I take pride in knowing that I'm raising these human beings and that they will be, hopefully, if I do the job I'm supposed to, and they have a say in the matter too, but hopefully I'm raising self-sufficient, contributing members of a healthy and valuable society. But they also teach me sacrifice and discipline and thinking about something beyond yourself. And, you know, as I watch my children, I have 4 children, I watch them all interact with me and their mother and their friends and life in different ways. I learn things from them. You know, like my daughter is very nurturing, and that's not something I am. And so I watch her and I'm like, that's interesting. My oldest is very sensitive. He's very in tune with the way other people are feeling and experiencing things. And that makes me better. You know, my second son, he's very analytical. And so I see him play with his Legos, or I see him coding on his computer and he's just poring over the details on the formulas and the codes. And that's interesting. And then I see my youngest, who is just a hellion, and his enthusiasm and his excitement for life and how passionate he is. I'm like, I need to be more like that. So I learn from them. And I also learn patience. You know, it's a challenge. It's not easy. So I think that's why anybody would ask the question, because it's hard. If it was easy, you wouldn't have to ask that question and everybody would have kids and they'd be great fathers and mothers. But it's not. It's hard, man. It's really, really hard, but it's also very rewarding and fulfilling. And I wish I could just give you a better answer, but some of the things, some of the benefits of having children are intangible and hard for me to quantify, but the entire package is what makes it so valuable for me.
Yeah.
I don't know that does it doesn't, as I listen to it, it doesn't do it justice. I don't think I ever could do it justice. I just don't have a better answer than that. I mean, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
How about you though? I want to, yeah.
I think if you answered the question from the perspective of what would your rating of living a fulfilled and complete life be as a father versus not, and they are black and white differences. Like I really honestly feel like if I didn't have the experiences and the opportunities of being a father, and I just, my life would not even slightly look as fulfilled as it does because of my opportunity to be a dad. So it's profound. And the values, I mean, I don't know about you, but like first time you see your kid, you know, you hear this concept, you know, in scripture of unconditional love, right? And you're like, theoretically, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand. And then you have a kid and you're like, oh, now I get it. Mm-hmm. Like all of a sudden, like a switch turns on and you go, now I know what it's like to actually love someone unconditionally. That this person could do anything to me and I would never stop loving them. And it's great because now you have this built-in weirdness that you just learn that. And then you can use that as the model of like, oh, okay, now how do I do that with my spouse? Because it doesn't come as easy, right? And I think it also helps me with my relationship, not to get all spiritual, but like, I think it helps me with my relationship with my creator.
Totally.
With my God, right? Because I can't, it's hard to look at that relationship unless I put myself in the role of father and I put him in the role of father, and then all of a sudden I get it.
Right.
Because I know what a father, I know all fathers, we all know. We know what it's like to be a father. We know how we feel about our kids. We understand what we'd be willing to do for them. And we have that common bond of fatherhood. So
it's also interesting. Those are all very good points. It's also interesting to acknowledge and recognize and experience firsthand the capacity for love that we have. So you have your first child and you fully love that child, and then you have your second child and you fully love that child, and you have your
that's
fourth
the other
child,
thing that blows your mind.
That child.
Yeah, because I'm sure you did the same thing. You're like, oh, we're gonna have another kid, and then you're like, so which one am I gonna love more? Right? You work through that whole thing, and then you have another child, and you're like, that's weird. I love them but
differently. Sure.
You didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even know that was possible. I thought there was always a pecking order to your love. And then you have two kids and you're like, that's weird, and you would never know that unless you're a parent, I think.
The other thing I thought about while you were saying that, and I know this is not going to be what everybody thinks, but my belief is that we've been commanded to multiply and replenish the earth. And I can't think of any better way to change the culture and society than to have millions and millions of righteous sons and daughters who are growing up in loving homes with a mother and a father, who know the value of hard work and discipline and integrity, who have been disciplined and given structure and love and support, now going out and doing the same thing for their communities and their businesses and their eventual families. So we've been instructed and commanded to. I realize not everybody believes that, but you're asking me, and that's my belief.
Yeah. Well, and I recently, super cool. I can share resources with you later, but I was just looking over some ancestry stuff, like my genealogy. And so I'm like a fourth cousin with James Madison, right? And I'm a cousin of some famous pioneer that moved from Ireland in New York, and she made her way to Sevier County, Utah on her own, and I can't help but like see the value in being part of the human family, right?
Totally.
And knowing that someday my life will be looked upon by my descendants, and that they'll say, what did he do? Right. And that would not be possible. Like, I know this for you, Ryan. It's like you care about your legacy.
Of course.
Right. Well, if you didn't have kids, there's still a legacy. Don't get me wrong,
different.
But it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same. And I think the idea of having a legacy and descendants kind of puts the pressure on a little bit for us to like make sure that we live this life well, and we live in a way that we can honor those that will come behind us. Right. Yeah. And not just those that came before.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you said is your posterity, your kids and your grandkids will look at you and ask what you did, or they won't, and they won't know you because you did nothing and you weren't worth knowing. Like, I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah. But that kind of wakes you up, right? Like, totally, I'm kind of fired up right now thinking, shit, I need to get my shit together. Right. Am I, totally.
One thing you asked me about with, boat building being in my family earlier. I meant to mention that and I overlooked that. My great grandfather built his own fishing boat. My uncle reached out to me because he saw a picture of me building the canoe, and he said, "Man, I wish you could have seen your Uncle Carl's boat. He built this boat and he would go fishing with it. If I would have known that, I would have built a boat long ago." I didn't know that until I put it out there, and then I get to find that out. And he said he might have some pictures, and I'm hoping he can get those pictures to me because I think that'd be a good inspiration for me and my son, who's helping me build the boat. So, yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about last week with genealogy and how important that is. I think we touched on that last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and someone reached out to me from that episode last week and said,
"Oh, really?
Kipp." Yeah. He's like, there is a website called the Sons of the Revolution. And it's an organization where descendants of war veterans from the revolution, like, come together as a community. Right. I'm like, how awesome is that?
That is
right.
Awesome.
Well, and that's what caused me to look into my genealogy. Cause I was like, when did we come to America? Right. Cause I actually wanted to know, like, did I have descendants in America during that time?
Yeah.
but we came
And you
over
did.
after.
That's cool.
No,
I
we
guess
came
your family maybe. Like
Yeah.
like extended or another branch of your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So interesting and interesting nonetheless. All right. So I don't know if we want to cover this. I mean, Ray DeLunes, you asked, why did Ryan move to Maine? I think we've covered that quite a bit over the times. I don't know if you want to dive into it. But
I moved out here for an adventure. We didn't have everything figured out. We had the capacity to move, and I thought, man, what a great time to do it. Our kids are young. We have the financial means to be able to make it happen, so let's make it happen. And worst case scenario, 2 years later, we move home because we don't enjoy it. I don't anticipate that happening because we've loved it, but just an adventure.
But completely doable. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, and you dive into that even more in previous episodes. So super cool stuff. All right. Roselle001, what companies do you own? Do you invest in the stock market?
I do invest in the stock market, but I don't pick individual stocks, if that's what you're asking. My investment philosophy, and this comes from a financial planning background, is a broadly diversified portfolio. So thousands and thousands of companies, the ones you can name and the ones you can't, thousands and thousands of companies that I own. Outside of that, I have ownership in other businesses. Obviously, I own Order of Man. I sold a couple of years ago my financial planning practice. So I own businesses. I have silent shares in several others that I really won't get into right now. And then I own thousands of shares in other companies through our investment portfolio, mutual funds mostly.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and we're pretty diverse as well. I don't, you know what I mean? I'm not one. I don't trust myself to go. It's Tesla and like throw money. I just I'd rather.
I think that could be fun. I think if you have some some entertainment money and you think, oh, this is going to do really well, or Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin. I don't have all my money in Bitcoin, but I have money in Bitcoin, and if it goes to zero, okay, well, that sucks. But it isn't going to break us, But if it grows like it is, then that's nice. Yeah. But again, I'm not following it or watching it. So
yeah, I like your verbiage, entertainment money. It's like, it's the $20 that you take to the blackjack table in Vegas. It's for fun. Right. If you lose it, no big deal. Yeah.
Right. It's not a financial strategy, but it could play a part, or it could play a part. That for better or worse, it could play a part. So make sure it plays a part that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. All right. Silver Jura, what are the best methods or a few methods of introducing new habits and routines into your life while overriding old ones and or bad habits? I've watched the podcast for a while now, and I've learned a lot. Thank you for all that you do.
I'm actually probably not going to answer this question because I would just give you 2 books that you should read, and it would do a significantly better job than what I could give you. So I think anything that I said would mirror from these 2 books or do you some sort of injustice. So I would say
I know the one.
Okay,
I'm curious
Atomic
what the other
Habits,
one is.
Probably right. By James Clear. Great book. Yeah. Talks about that at length. Great. His blog and all that talks about it. The other one is Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. So you can read that too. He talks about
red and yellow, right?
Yeah.
Is it red and yellow?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He talks about I can't remember the exact terms, but I think the cue and the trigger and the reward or something like that. It's been a little while.
And he talks about the habit loop as well, I think.
Habit loop. That's what it is. That is the loop. So you have your trigger and then your cue and then your reward. Again, I'm butchering that. Like I said, I would do it injustice. But I would say if you're going to start somewhere, I would say start with Atomic Habits. Just read that book. That's better than I can give you. And significantly broader and more robust than what we can share here.
Yeah. And that book's a great book and highly insightful.
And we used it in the Iron Council just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
No, it's not basic. It's got some psychology. I mean, we had James on the podcast. If you want to go back and listen to that podcast, you can, but you've got human psychology and logic, but then emotion and how we get wrapped up into that. Like there's so much good information in that book. So go check it out.
Yeah. All right.
Let's take 1 or 2 more, Kipp.
All right. Uncage the Lion. Best advice for launching a podcast. What audio interface editing systems you use? Do you want me to find that episode? Actually, you have the website too.
I think you can go to orderofman.com/podcast gear and see what I personally use. Pat Flynn, if you search Pat Flynn's Guide to Podcasting, that's actually the exact strategy that I use from step 1 through 20, whatever it was, for launching this podcast. Look, don't overcomplicate it. That's what I would say. Just don't overcomplicate it. You'll need Zoom if you're doing remote. I've got I don't even know what these are called. Shure 7MB or something. What are they called?
The mic?
SM7B is what this microphone is, with the Rode boom arm. I think, Kipp, you've got the same setup.
Yep. Thanks to you, by the way. I don't know. Did I publicly thank you?
I don't know. I mean, you could always
this
do
is a public.
Again.
This is a
a
public thank you.
already did.
Ryan hooked me up before I was using like this thing. Actually, I wasn't using this, but
it's a little self-serving too, though, right? We clean up the quality, but it's a gift too. So we look after each other. That's important.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I use a Scarlett. I think it's 2i2 or T2i or something. Yeah. Look, you can see how much
2i2 Focusrite. Yep.
They have one with 2 microphones. They have one where you can plug in 4. When I'm traveling, which I will be over the next week or two, I use a Zoom recorder, and then I use these headsets right here. I've got 4 of these, and this is the HD 280 Pro. I don't know what brand it is. Like, you can tell how much I focus on this stuff. But HD.
I use these black headphones here.
Yeah. I got these. I think, Kipp, you're using these as well. The Raycons. I think they're, I don't know, 255 or something. Who knows? That's what these are in my ears right now. Just don't overcomplicate it. This is a great mic. A little bit more expensive. There's the ATR 2100. That's a good mic. It's like $60. That's actually all if you wanted to do this on the low budget, you would buy the ATR 2100, $60-$70. You would I personally use the program Audacity to edit. I don't edit it anymore. We have an editor, Cody Lanham. He does a wonderful job. But that's what he's using. Other people use GarageBand. I'm sure there's some Adobe things there. Like, just don't overcomplicate it. Do this. Go to Pat Flynn's Guide to Podcasting. Go through that. That's going to walk you through everything.
Cool. All right. Last question. This is a good one.
By the way, I'm not trying to deflect on these. I just want to make sure, because we talked about the habit thing, I'm not trying to deflect. I'm just telling you there's people who know it better than I do. And I would want people to tell me that if I'm asking a question. So Pat Flynn's got his guide. It's free. James Clear has his book. It's going to cost you $20, or go get it to the library, or $5 on Audible, whatever it is. Those are great resources. Those are the best resources. And anything I could tell you would be inferior to what that stuff has.
Copy. Okay, Shane Ravitz, how are you doing, Ryan?
I'm good.
And how do you effectively communicate with others for a mutual understanding?
Ask good questions. Questions are just so powerful. I mean, you remember when we were talking about your shirt, trying to network with somebody you've never met before? Ask them a question about themselves. Yeah. Like, why would you wear a shirt? Like, Kipp, that shirt means something to you, right? There's meaning to it. You've wrapped up meaning to it. It's a little bit of who you are. You're wearing it because you're trying to express something. So it's completely on the table for us to talk about. And I think you would want to talk about it, right? So yeah. I'm curious. So that is the greatest attribute I think that you can have for trying to understand people, is to be genuinely curious. If you jump to a bunch of conclusions and you think you know what that individual is about, and you think they're going to know what they're going to say, like I had a guy, he had some critique, some criticism. He wasn't overly critical, but it was criticism. And he basically came back and he shared this, and I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I should take this to heart. And then he wrote something like, and I don't care if you respond back to me, because whatever you say, it doesn't matter to me. And I'm like,
really?
Yeah. I'm like, what? Why would you say that? Like, how is that going to open up a dialogue? Yeah. Like, how do you think somebody's going to receive that? Instead, I think a better way maybe to do it would be to say, hey, Kipp, I noticed that you were doing X, Y, and Z, and on the surface, I don't really understand it. It comes across as arrogant or something, whatever, right? But what's your reason for doing that? Like, isn't that the pathway to understanding? Curiosity. No preconceived idea. No accusation. Just stating a simple fact. It noticed you did this. I interpreted it as meaning this. So I'm very curious as to why you did that or said that or did it this way. And then you allow that person, I would almost say you afford that person the grace of like giving them a space to answer and explain themselves. And then you might come back and say, oh, okay, I still don't agree, but yeah, okay. Yeah. I can appreciate that you have an opinion about it. But curiosity, and I've only gotten pretty good at this, I think, through podcasting. I have to be curious. Otherwise, I'll never present a great conversation for you guys to listen to. So when somebody says something I don't agree with, I'm not like, oh, you're wrong. Oh, you should. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's like, what makes you say that? I mean, what about the way that you believe or think or your experiences leads you to that conclusion? And I'm not doing it accusatory. Like, I'm not poking at them, right? Like, what? How could you believe that? That's an accusation disguised as a question. Like, I'll have people say, well, I'm just asking a question. Yes, technically it had a question mark, but it was an accusation disguised as a question. We all know the motive. So your motive has to be pure. Curiosity. That means you care. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be curious.
Yeah.
Being curious with other people illustrates some level of care. I care about what you have to say, which is why I'm curious what you're going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Cubby's, seek first to understand, kind of mentality. And by the way, the other person knows, right? Like, well, let's talk like the t-shirt example, right? We're at a networking event. Ryan comes up to me and goes, oh, protect, provide, preside. That's interesting. What is that about? And then if it's not genuine, I'll go, oh, well, it's this podcast, whatever, I'll talk about it's this podcast that I help contribute with or whatever. And I stop there and the guy goes, oh, cool. Not genuine. And I know, because if you were genuinely curious, you'd be like, oh, what kind of podcast? Like, when someone just asks a question to start versus if they're like, oh, and I've seen this so many times where it's a strategy, right? And then you're like, yeah, you really didn't want to know. Like, you could tell that there's not enough interest and they just wanted to start a conversation. Yeah.
What's funny is when I was doing financial planning, if I was interested in trying to like get a client or something and they asked me what I'd be doing, I had this elevator speech, this pitch of what I'd do. Yeah. And if for whatever reason I wasn't interested in like picking up a client or something and people would ask, I'd always say, I sell life insurance. And it would shut them up real quick.
You used it to like deter people from asking you questions, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just being curious, state the question one more time just so I make sure we answered it.
Sorry, man.
Did you close it?
Where's it at? Oh, how do you effectively communicate with others for mutual understanding? Well, and mutual understanding is kind of interesting, right? Because it's a little loaded. Like, I want you to understand me, but
the way that question is worded, which is why I wanted to ask you again, is how do you communicate effectively when the way that the question is worded? I don't know if this is true or not, but the way it's worded is making it sound like you want other people to understand you.
Yeah.
How do I communicate so that you'll understand me? And what we're suggesting is you stop thinking like that. I mean, I think that's important, sure.
Yeah.
But maybe let's pull a page out of Jocko's verbiage, flank a little bit. But again, the motive has to be pure. And you flank somebody by saying, look, so I go to the small example. I got my patriarch shirt on today, okay? So we go to this networking group. You and I don't know each other. And I go up to you and I say, hey, so protect, provide, preside, what is that? Can you tell me about that? And you tell me and I ask questions about it. What would you naturally do?
I'd be like, well, it's right in line with your shirt.
And then you would say, what's up with your shirt?
Yeah.
If you didn't know that they were both order man shirts, right? You'd be like, so like, this is what this means. And what's that about? Same thing with a job. If I went to you and I said, hey, so, we're here at this networking thing. What do you do for work? And you tell me and we go on a little bit. What would you naturally do?
How about you? What do you
do for work?
Of course.
Hey, where are you from? I'm from here. Where are you from? That's how conversation works. Social media has changed the dynamic a little bit, but that's how conversation works. Every once in a while I'll post something and they'll quit back and they'll say, even if it's respectful, they'll say something and I'll disagree with them. And they're like, well, I'm just trying to share my opinion. I'm like, no, I know, but this is how dialogue works. I share something and then you share something and then I share something back. Like, I'm not obligated to agree with you. Just like, I don't think you should shut up. I'm just saying I don't agree with you. This is dialogue. Social media has made it all but impossible. So let's learn to open the lines of communication a little bit. Stop worrying so much about getting people to understand you. Try to understand them. They'll give you plenty of opportunities to present your ideas if you do this in a genuine way.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think there's a whole other side conversation about effective communicating, right? That we could probably even talk about, but
yeah.
All right, let's wrap up.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So we've talked about a handful of things. Like these Instagram guys, you can follow Mr. Mickler at Ryan Mickler on Instagram and Twitter. If it's still running, who knows? Maybe
Twitter will be running. You won't
maybe
find
Ryan's going to get banned.
Twitter will be going. Yeah. That's true, actually. I have I've really refrained from telling people how many followers I've lost because, those, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it is noticeable. I'll say that. It is noticeable. It's very interesting. I thought people were just complaining and no, it's noticeable.
Yeah. And it's not just like, I don't know. It's crazy. If you pulled the numbers and you had to classify like social media accounts and how they've varied in followings and promoting, there's some major adjustments occurring. Yeah, it's nuts. But regardless, Mr. Mickler's still on social media. You can follow him at Ryan Mickler, and spread this message. It seems like we say it every week, right? But like in the climate of things, it's just crazy. And I can't, if you don't mind me just expressing this fairly quickly, when I think about news sitting in the middle and citizens on the side, and there's this polarization of people getting mad at each other with people poking and prodding both sides. And at the center of that a little bit is the lack of critical thinking and sovereignty. Like, be an independent thinker, right? And that's what's promoted on this podcast. That's what the Order of Man movement is about, is being with like-minded men seeking sovereignty in all areas, right? Financially, as well as your mental maturity and owning your lives. And so it's just so needed. And I can't help but over this weekend and the last couple of days is just realizing how important this movement is. And it becomes more important. It gets its steam based upon obviously you guys implementing these things in your lives, but also sharing this message. And you can do so via sharing links from the podcast, from the YouTube channel, following Ryan on social media and sharing those meaningful posts. That's how we create momentum. That's how we help people level up. That's how we hold each other accountable and become better as a group, as a whole. So there you go. There's the spill. And of course, swag in the store. So grab some t-shirts. So some guy can follow up. So some guy will follow up and ask about, hey, what does that mean? Yeah. Which, by the way, has happened to me all the time.
A lot of people do that.
Most
a lot of people do that. Or they'll send me a message and they'll say, hey, I was in North Dakota and I was driving down the road and I saw a truck with a Order of Man sticker and I passed him and we both nodded and we knew that we were in this battle to reclaim and restore masculinity together. That part didn't happen. But the other part where they saw and thought it was cool is that did happen.
Yeah. That happens I think it's cool. Yeah. And when I don't want to talk to him because I'm busy working out, like, oh, it's just like a white privilege podcast. And then I just.
The tyrannical patriarchy. No, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't like it.
Yeah. It's about men domineering over all social groups. It's not that cool.
It's not cool. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Great questions today. Keep them coming. Kipp, you're flying solo next week. So, now that I'm warning the people, we'll see how many people listen. Because look, we haven't given it a fair assessment.
We warned them.
You know, it's like, I'll give you the numbers when it's on your own. And, you know, those aren't accurate numbers because we don't tell people that. They just assume I'm going to be here.
Yeah, they download it and then they're like, no.
Yeah, so they've already downloaded it. So now we're going to give you a warning because we want to see, are you going to have better numbers or worse numbers when Kipp is flying solo? We'll see. We'll put this theory.
Let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
Bring it. Yeah, I'm going to call all my family members.
Good. You'll have 5 more downloads then.
That's 0.
Right. All right, guys. Appreciate you. We'll be back on Friday for our Friday field notes. Until then, go out there, take action, become the man you are meant to be.